We'll be going over IRS Form 911, Request for Taxpayer Advocate Service Assistance. So this is an updated version of this form. The last video we did was a couple years ago, and they've since updated this form, I believe March of 2024. So we're going to go over this form. There's not a lot of significant changes. However, there are some filing considerations that you may want to take into account when you're looking to request assistance from the taxpayer advocate. So first and foremost, this is not the only way that you can request assistance from the taxpayer advocate. So you can go to the Taxpayer Advocate Service website, and you can request assistance through a variety of different ways. This form, it will help you receive a response from the taxpayer advocate. However, you may prefer other options. For example, there is an option where you can receive the pop-up from the taxpayer advocate digital assistant, and you can navigate the IRS website through that. You can also use the advocate service site to drill down into specific pieces of correspondence, such as CP notices that you might receive from the IRS. If you receive documentation or correspondence through the mail and you have no idea what it is for, you can go to the taxpayer advocate's site to look up additional information. So there are a couple of things that you should know when you file this form. You should expect to provide documentation that you think might help the IRS, that will help the taxpayer advocate, move a little bit more quickly. If you list a phone number, you should expect someone to give you a call. And if they can't reach you by phone, they're going to mail you a letter. They're going to leave you a voicemail if you indicate that you're okay with that. So be sure that you are aware of specifically what you're requesting so that you can understand how they might be trying to reach out. And for low-income taxpayers, there is a service called a low-income taxpayer clinic that you may be able to receive free or low-cost assistance on complicated tax issues, particularly if you meet certain lower income thresholds, if you speak English as a second language and you need assistance navigating a language challenge. That's what these services are for. So let's go through really quickly the different sections of the form. Section 1 is the taxpayer information. That's most of page 1. Section 2 lists third-party information. So if you've requested that a third party, such as maybe your CPA or a tax attorney or another person, is helping you and they have you've granted them IRS permission previously, then you would enter their information in Section 2. And then Section 3 is completed by the IRS employee. We'll walk through that just so that you can have a better understanding of what the IRS may be looking for and certain things that pop out of the form instructions that I caught when I reviewed this. So let's go to the very top of the form. We're talking about John and Mary Doe filing as a joint couple and requesting assistance on their Form 1040 from the IRS. So if you're a married couple filing joint tax returns, you should put information for each spouse on the form. You should also expect that each spouse is supposed to sign it. So in this case, we put John Doe's information, his name, his taxpayer ID number. So this is his social security number, but it could be an employer identification number if you're a business entity. It could be an individual taxpayer ID number if you don't have a social security number. So In box 3A, or line 3A, 3B, 3C, and 3D, we're going to enter the street address, city, state, and zip code. And remember, if the IRS cannot contact you by phone, they're going to send correspondence to your address. So if you have recently moved, you may consider filing the IRS change of address form. You should consider doing that. IRS Form 8822 is the official change of address form. And then that way you can stay on top of any correspondence if for some reason the IRS isn't able to get a hold of you on the phone and they start sending you letters and correspondence. So in line 4, you would enter your fax number if you have one. Line 5, you're going to enter your email address. So the taxpayer advocate may use email to either receive and share information with you about your case, but only after previously discussing the use of email with you and getting your consent. So the IRS will not start a conversation or initiate any contact by email, but once you've had that discussion with an advocate, you may see emails if you've given permission, just because they are a quicker turnaround, and then they can walk you through what you should be looking for so you can distinguish a legitimate IRS email from a scam or an imposter. In line 6, if you do not designate anyone in Section 2, then you can list a person that the IRS should contact if you're not available. So for a partnership, a corporation, or a trust, this would be the name of an individual that's authorized to act on that entity's behalf. If the contact person is not the taxpayer or another authorized individual, then the directions for Section 2 apply. And that specifically says for individuals, if you wish to have a representative act on your behalf, you have to give them a power of attorney or tax information authorization. So there are specific forms, and we'll talk about the differences in those in Section 2. So in line 7A, you're going to enter your daytime telephone number, check the box if it's a cell phone. And in 7B, this is where you would check to allow the IRS or the taxpayer advocate to leave information that might be considered confidential about your tax issue. So if you're okay with that in your voicemail, then you can check that box. If you don't check that box, then your correspondence may be a little bit slower. So just keep in mind the IRS instructions state if there are other individuals that have access to this voicemail or the answering machine behind that number, and you don't want them to receive your information, then don't check the box. Pretty straightforward. In line 8, you can indicate the best time to call, either AM or PM hours. In line 9, if you have a preferred English or language other than English, then enter that or check the appropriate box. So if you're deaf, there's a way that the IRS can reach you through a TTY or a TDD. You may also need an interpreter for certain languages, so you could specify a language that you would need an interpreter. In line 10, you would enter the tax form number. So for most individual taxpayers, this would be your Form 1040. But if you're an employer, if you're a corporate entity, if you're a trustee of a trust or a representative of an estate, it could very well be many different form numbers. And then in line 11, indicate the tax year or the periods that you're talking about. So in 12A, you're going to describe the tax issue at hand that you're facing difficulties with. So, for example, I'll indicate a problem that came across my inbox this morning. So, according to the form instructions, you should describe the tax issue that you're experiencing and any difficulties that that tax issue may be creating. So, for most taxpayers, that's probably going to be a tax issue or a tax problem that is leading into some sort of financial distress, right? Like the IRS specifically has guidance that tells people that um, you know, uh, tax issues that are further complicating someone or a tax issue that can be resolved before it, you know, creates an unnecessary financial hardship should be prioritized. So it doesn't mean that like the IRS is going to help every single taxpayer that's in a bunch of credit card debt and student loan debt and they owe $500 on their tax return. So the IRS is going to drop everything to help that guy out. But it does mean that if the IRS made a mistake or disallowed a credit for a not obvious reason and there is not enough information for the taxpayer to make an appropriate decision, then this would be a consideration item. Ultimately, the IRS will make a decision. They use criteria that's in Section 7 or Section 3 under line 7. And a couple of those is the taxpayer is experiencing economic harm or is about to suffer economic harm, significant costs if relief is not granted, adverse action. All of these have very specific meanings within the IRS. So, your best bet or your best opportunity to demonstrate that you need help is to try and convince the IRS that your tax issue is directly related to some sort of financial hardship or an economic, circumstance that could be avoidable if you're able to get that tax help that you need. So again, tax help doesn't necessarily mean writing off a tax. It could be simply, hey, I need a little bit more time to gather documents and I just need to put a 30-day pause on some sort of collection process so that I can get the right paperwork, right? So, try to describe the tax issue, and then in line 12B, try to describe the type of relief that you need. I have supporting document, but I need 30 days to organize it and send it to the IRS. Something like that. So, one other item in 12A, if the issue involves an IRS delay of more than 30 days in resolving your issue, then indicate the date that you first tried to contact the IRS for assistance. So if in 12A you've been going back and forth with the IRS already, or you already reached out to the IRS, then put in the date where you first reached out. This could be, the first time that you tried to call. It could be the first time that you, reached out to the interactive assistant. But, indicate how long you've been doing this. And again, Section 3 contains the list of specific taxpayer advocate criteria that they're looking for to kind of process this request. So again, in 12B, we're saying, hey, I have supporting documentation, but I need 30 days to kind of get it all together so that I can do this, so I can complete this form, so that I can properly claim this credit, whatever the case may be. And then in lines 13 and 14, you and your spouse, as applicable, will sign and date the form. So in section 2, you're going to probably have your authorized third party do this. So let's just say that James Smith is helping the Does. Now, The centralized authorization file, this is a unique number that your tax professional is going to have assigned to him or her. So if you have, say, your CPA or your tax attorney, if they've been doing representation work in front of the IRS before, they're going to have a number. They'll probably enter it in here for you. And this is a number that basically resides in the IRS centralized authorization file. So what this means is James Smith, if his number is this right here, when the IRS looks into that file, they can reference this number and it'll show all the different client accounts where he's either listed on a form 2848 or a form 8821 on file with the IRS, where those taxpayers have given specific permissions to Mr. Smith to do something with their tax information. So I'll take a break right now and talk about the differences between IRS Form 2848 and IRS Form 8821, because they both allow taxpayers to grant certain permissions to their tax professional, but they're a little bit different. So IRS Form 8821 is the tax information authorization form. So a lot of CPAs may request tax information just so they can kind of resolve an issue, some sort of tax issue. They just need to get information from your file. Or increasingly, a lot of financial planners that I know have also been having clients complete IRS Form 8821 because it gives them access to certain tax information, which then helps them prepare for tax planning meetings throughout the year. So when I was practicing as a financial planner, we would request tax returns from our clients. We would then use those tax returns to do a tax projection. We would sit down and talk about tax planning moves or major transactions that we were considering during the year so that we could figure out strategies and ways to keep taxes down. Roth conversions, for example, or IRA rollovers, things of that nature, where if you're not careful or if you do things in a certain manner, you can either avoid a huge tax bill or you can create a huge tax bill while trying to achieve a result. So IRS Form 8821 allows a certain person to obtain that tax information without having to tap you on the shoulder. IRS Form 2848 is the power of attorney form. So that same person would be able to obtain all of your tax information in the same way. They would also have certain representation powers in front of the IRS. And as a taxpayer, you can authorize as much or as little in the way of representation powers as you want. So an enrolled agent, an attorney, or a CPA in good standing, they have what are known as unlimited representation rights in front of the IRS, which means that any of those persons with a power of attorney form completed can go through the highest levels of the IRS administrative processes. So appeals, things of that nature, as long as they're internal to the IRS and as long as they're administrative in nature. If you venture outside of that and you start going to tax court, for example, then only a lawyer would be able to represent you in a court case practicing law. You can still have your tax professional, present information in a testimony, I imagine. But as far as representation, the IRS Form 2848 gives unlimited representation power to in front of the IRS for administrative matters, but not necessarily in a court of law. So those are the differences between either of those forms. And again, if you're listed as a professional or a representative, then you have a CAF number that would go in box 2. So let's go ahead and complete the rest of James Smith's information. So he's going to complete his daytime phone number. If it's a cell phone, he'll check here. If not, he won't. And then his fax number. And then he's going to sign right here, and he'll date his signature right there. So that's pretty much all you need to know about Section 2. There's not a whole lot of guidance there. In Section 3, we'll kind of walk through most of this is administrative in nature. So if you as the taxpayer were outlining the tax issues, the relief, the stuff that you've already done, this is the part where the employee will be filling this out based on, where they work, all of this stuff, when they received it, and then they're going to use this to kind of indicate, what they received from the taxpayer when they call you or when they correspond with you. They're going to indicate what type of help they think you may need. What are the actions that they took to help you with your issue? For example, there may be limitations on what the taxpayer advocate can do for a taxpayer. Things that involve statute of limitations or returning, like the form instructions state specifically, levy proceeds cannot be returned if they were already applied to a valid tax bill. An overpayment cannot be refunded if the statutory period for issuing a refund is expired, or if there's a current law that precludes, interest abatement. Like if there are things that are specifically precluded because the overarching guidance or the law or the regulation trumps that request, then the taxpayer advocate is supposed to document that. So in this case, they would describe the actions. This is literally what it says in the form instructions. So, nope. It says for box 8 that the taxpayer advocate would provide a description of the situation and, where appropriate, explaining the circumstances that create this economic burden and how the taxpayer could be adversely affected if the requested assistance is not provided. So in other words, this is kind of where that taxpayer advocate is going to take your story and say, hey, this is why we need to help this person out. And then in line 9, they're going to kind of give a little bit more detail about your situation and how they learned about you and what would happen if they don't get your help. Line 10, this is where they'll indicate how you learned about the Taxpayer Advocate Service. Was it a form or a publication? Was it from an IRS employee? Was it media? Did you learn about it on the news or something like that? So, and then on the back, there are instructions. So real quick, the filing considerations, we'll put a link to the Taxpayer Advocate Service contact information in our video show notes. So the quickest way to file this form is to fax it. You can also mail it to the local taxpayer advocate office for your state or local area. You can fax it from overseas, and you should, if you don't receive a response within 30 days, call. There's a phone number, 877-777-4778 for assistance. Don't submit another version of this because the IRS will create a different referral, and it might actually impede your help. So, and then finally, the IRS wants you to know that you can't, they can hold you accountable for frivolous arguments Uh, every once in a while on my videos, I'll get something like the federal government rips you off. You shouldn't waste your time paying taxes. That's well and good. That's also considered a frivolous argument, and you can be subject to penalties. I learned up to $5,000, even if you don't actually owe a tax bill. So if for some reason you got a refund, but you still decide to file a frivolous argument, you're going to be subject to a penalty of $5,000, even if you're normally owed a refund. Most of these penalties are like failure to file penalties or failure to pay penalties, are based on how much of your tax bill is still hanging out there. But a frivolous argument, you can pay a $5,000 penalty even if you have paid the rest of your taxes. So the IRS wants you to know that. At the top of the form, there's not a whole lot left that we didn't cover. We do cover some finer details in our article, which you can find on our website. Simply go to teachmepersonalfinance.com, type in IRS Form 911, and you'll see the article there. If you like our articles, please subscribe to our newsletter. If you like our YouTube videos, please subscribe to our channel. And if you have any questions or comments, or if there's another topic that you'd like to see a upcoming video on, please hit me up in the comment section. Thank you very much and have a great day.